Now, pygmies. These are pygmies. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen, these are pygmy tribes. Now, pygmies they're like Australopithecus. You remember A. robustus and A. africanus? They were this size. And that's what that's why they call them Australopithecus. They call them Australoids, Australopithecus like people. Now, the adult males grow to less than 59 inches in average height. Now, fossils of African pygmies date from 12,000 years ago. Now, Asian pygmies are called negritos. Now, the earliest known fossils of negritos come from Indonesia, and they date from approximately 10,000 years ago. Now, like the first Australopithecus tribes, the later pygmies and negritos were hunters and gatherers, and the majority of current-day pygmies and negritos are still trying to retain the hunting and gathering lifestyle. Now, pygmies were created by the Malta Temple breeding program. So in other words, they brought back Java man, Peking man, H. erectus, and pygmies. Now, there are no large Negroid people currently existing in Southeast Asia. Only remnant groups of negritos are found in the Andaman Islands, the Malay Peninsula, and the Philippines. And you notice Philippines and a lot of Chinese people who have Filipino heritage are the little people, or they're smaller. Well, they're getting bigger now though, but they used to be smaller. Now, other negritos live in India, Sumatra, and isolated areas of Southeast Asia. Pygmies currently live in tropical Africa, the Kalahari, in equatorial Africa, regions south of the Congo River, and forests west of the Ubangi River. Now, what happened? Now, the Malta Temple breeding program regressed spirits back an entire dimension to the time of Peking man, Java man, H. erectus tribes, Heidelberg tribes, and Australopithecus tribes. Now, the Malta Temple used religion, deception, and false images, or mental confusion to shadow spirits and expand predatory heritage. They did it with light. Now, many people think of today as a modern advanced world with cars, trains, flight, and brain surgery. Now, tree fanning is a surgical operation in which a piece of the skull bone is cut from the skull. Now, archaeologists state that tree fanning was practiced among Aryans of Tenerife, that's Aryan Atlantis, in the Canary Islands. Now, the researchers have located skulls of unknown antiquity, but some date from 14,000 to 12,000 years ago. Now, evidence of tree fanning was found in fossils of American Indians, some Melanesian tribes of northwestern Africa. It is known that ancient surgeons successfully removed the tables of the skull and exposed the brain coverings, and subjects lived, because in some instances the operation was repeated. Now, Casey's readings refer to the use of devices that cause one to become different-minded and those that cause reactions in the brain forces of the body. And just hold on to that thought. We have to come back to that. Now, Casey described Atlantean transportation systems that ran on land, underwater, and in the skies. Now, tracks around Malta, these are some of the tracks around Malta. See, these people are sitting in the tracks, and see how deep they are, and they run. Listen to this. Tracks around Malta indicate that such a system was used to transport barbarian armies to the Americas to invade the Kingdom of Atlanta. Archaeologist Graham Hancock stated that sets of parallel tracks are cut into the bedrock in and around Malta. Some tracks are 3.28 feet or more deep, and they are cut into definite patterns with junction points where multiple railway lines converged and diverged. And some pairs of tracks run straight, some curve, some cross over one another, and there's no particular sense of organization. But now, the tracks on the south side of the island have vestiges of wheels that cut into the rock, and they may be traced to the sea. And the roots may be perceived underwater at a great distance and to a great depth. Indeed, as far as the eye can possibly distinguish anything through the waves. So the tracks run out through the water. Now, geochronologists state that the Scandinavian ice sheet pushed southward in Europe, and the Iowan ice sheet advanced in North America around 13,000 years ago. Now, that Scandinavian ice sheet flowed from the Gulf of Bothnia into Poland, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Bulgaria. Now, armies from Malta Temple flowed with ice. They invaded the Americas around 13,000 years ago. Historians estimate that 70% of large mammals in North America became extinct between 13,000 and 11,000 years ago, with extinctions clustering around 13,000 years ago. Now, France Weidenrich is recognized as an outstanding authority on Java and Peking man. Now, he examined a skull and bones from Lake Texcoco, Mexico, that date from 13,000 to 11,000 years ago. Now, Weidenrich found 8 features in the skull that are more primitive than those previously found on modern skulls. The brow ridges were very heavy and formed a well-marked bulge above the nose and ridge on the back of the head. And these skulls were widespread in Central and South America between 13,000 and 10,000 years ago. Now, Terra del Fuego lies at the extreme tip of South America. The entire region was heavily glaciated during the ice ages, and some glaciers remained in recent periods. Now, most modern-day people of Terra del Fuego were descendants of people who arrived there between 14,000 and 13,000 years ago. Now, like other tribes with strong Java heritage, Fijians are adapted to the cold, live in a rigid caste system, and enslave females. Fijians reverted to cannibalism when food was scarce. Now, Charles Darwin, who wrote The Origin of Species, or somewhat, I've got his book, I can't remember the name. But anyway, when Darwin arrived in Terra del Fuego aboard the Beagle in 1832, he was appalled by the primitive condition in which the inhabitants of this savage land dwell. Stark naked Indians paddled through rough seas in summer, temperatures between 35 and 45 degrees. At night they slept naked on wet, frozen ground. It is now known that the Fijians' metabolic rate is higher than the human norm. Now, at the time of Darwin, in 1832, these people still held legends that told how the men had overturned a previous regime that was dominated by women, meaning the kingdom of Atlantis. Now, modern science states that the poles of the earth shifted around 13,000 years ago. Researchers state that the landmass of Antarctica, now here is, I guess I better use the globe. Let me just pull this out. Can't see it on the map. Now, the landmass of Antarctica down here was positioned right about here, about 2,000 or so miles north. And it moved to its present position as a result of a massive displacement of the Earth's crust around 13,000 years ago. The city of Tiahuanaca, Bolivia, that was the one with the big gateway to the sun and all the huge blocks, and with the Machu Picchu, or whatever you call it. Modern science states that the city of Tiahuanaca suffered immense destruction around 13,000 years ago and fell into total and definitive decay. Now, Graham Hancock wrote, "The city of Tiahuanaco was once a port, complete with extensive docks, positioned on the shore of Lake Titicaca. The problem is that Tiahuanaco's ruins are now marooned about 12 miles south of the lake and more than 100 feet higher than the present shoreline. In the period since the city was built, it therefore follows that one of two things must have happened. Either the level of the lake has fallen greatly, or the land on which Tiahuanaco stands has risen comparatively." Now, archaeological evidence indicates that Siberia was warm or temperate immediately prior to the polar shift of 13,000 years ago. Now, in his survey of the New Siberian Islands, the Arctic explorer Baron Edward von Toll found the remains of a saber-toothed tiger and the fruit tree that had been 90 feet tall when it was standing. The tree was well preserved in the permafrost with its roots and seeds. Green leaves and ripe fruit still clung to its branches. The mammoth died suddenly in intense cold and in great numbers. Death came so quickly that the swallowed vegetation is yet undigested. Grasses, bluebells, buttercups, wild beans have been found, yet identified and undeteriorated in their mouths and stomachs. That's how quickly they froze. That's how quickly